I got a detective sitting next to him, and he's in the back seat, and he's cuffed up in the front. And I love eating Fig Newtons. So I'm sitting in the front. I'm not driving, and I'm eating Fig Newtons.
And for all the freaking cookies you could have.
I'm sorry. So I look in the rearview mirror, and the homicide guy is sitting next to him, and he's giving me this look. And I'm like, all right, fine. And I start tossing over my shoulder Fig Newtons, and the guy's catching him. He's eating the Fig Newtons. And he's like, this guy's committed all of these crimes. Why are you doing this? I'm like, look, I got to be at a different level.
Sure.
All right? Now the DNA kicks in.
We're back, part 2, with Edward Tacchi here in Ossining, New York, the palatial estates of my co-host, my partner in law enforcement, Bill Cannon.
I never heard anyone call him Edward. Everyone always calls him Eddie Tacchi, right?
All
But
right,
that's
well,
okay.
Eddie,
That's
you
fine.
can call him Edward.
Whatever you want.
Before we start, I know that you have something you want to say. Before you say that, I just want to say this. I really admire your enthusiasm. Because Bill is, what do they call that? High strung.
Buff, yeah, type A.
Type A, man, all the way. And I'm laid back.
I admit it.
I think we make a nice fit with each other because of that.
Yeah.
But man, if you could right now, would you get back in a radio car right now with Eddie here and go hit the streets?
No, when he talks about these big cases, I want to be with him, man. I want to go get this guy. I want to put this guy in prison for the rest of his miserable life, you know. So Cuomo can let him out when he's 55,
Right.
But no,
would you consider Eddie an expert in DNA?
Absolutely.
So he is the SVU.
He is
the real deal.
Well, you know what is. When you watch SVU and Law & Order, it's sort of anesthetized. It doesn't really get the real grit and the real danger and the savagery of these crimes. It's television.
It tries
to, but it doesn't.
Without the blood and the guts and really, the backstories to it, intimate details. They try. They cover. I'm sure it's an hour show.
Look, when he was talking about surgically dissecting this savage in a state prison in his interrogation, they can't capture that on TV. First of all, it takes a long time to get there. And, TV has an hour and, 46 minutes maybe, or 44 minutes with commercials.
Right, I suspect so.
But it takes time. But when he talks about methodically, I know why he's doing it, Yeah, were you ever in 425 East 105 Street, apartment 8, David? Were you ever there? You were never there, right? And of course, it takes a long time to get to asking that question. Then how do you explain that your DNA was in that apartment? And then all of a sudden you see the guy's face. And obviously, I just cut to the chase like TV does.
What's funny is that I mentioned that most of the people we interviewed so far have had books or have been on TV, and it's been brought to my attention that we're continuing on this pattern because one of your cases was on America's Most Wanted, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. I had an interesting case. This elderly woman from Europe was homeless. She's homeless. And she was living under the West Side Highway in the 70s. And
you mean 70th Street, not in the 1970s.
Right, 70th Street. Correct. And right by a ballpark there, paddleball court, actually, handball and paddleball.
East side or west side?
On the west side.
West side, okay.
West Side Highway. And he brutally attacks her. She puts up a fight. She's very spunky, even though she was in her 60s. And he's just pounding her, beating her, and sexually assaulting her, and she looked like a train wreck. She really did. And then he leaves her, and she manages to come up the steps, and she goes to a hotel, not a hotel, an apartment building that was nearby that had a doorman, and, leaving blood smears everywhere. And, they call an ambulance, and I get the case. And I'm working this case, and I'm working this case forever. And I start, we obviously process the crime scene and her and interviewing her and setting up so that we can have communication, which ended up going on for years, by the way.
Yeah, because how do you find her?
Right.
Yeah.
We ended up the DA's office gave her a cell phone.
Okay.
So that we could keep in contact. And I'm working the case, and I'm just starting to look towards, and this is something that's going to be interesting later. I started looking at crimes committed against women, crimes committed in park settings, crimes committed in park settings near water. We get the DNA uploaded, and I'm not making as much as I'm doing, and it's just pulling out all the stops, I'm not getting an ID. And then the DNA on the case gets uploaded, and it connects to 3 cases, all occurring near the water in a park-like setting down in Miami Beach.
Wow.
Wow.
So now I've got 3 cases. I go down to Miami Beach.
It hit in CODIS.
It hit in CODIS.
In CODIS, okay.
And so here's your cold hit.
The national,
Right?
Combined DNA identification system.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we've got a pattern, but we've got no ID. But, invariably what you have information from the 2 cases that you can start cross-referencing and starting to look if we can identify somebody. And I went to the chief. I think it was Bill Ali. And
I liked Ali.
So did I. And I asked if I could, put it on America's Most Wanted, and he said yes. And I don't know, I spoke to my victim. And
Did you do a lot of work on it?
I did a ton of work on it.
So you had
I had a
case folder was impressive to say.
I had a folder that looked like an encyclopedia
And
set.
this was like a year
That's how
or
many
2 years
fives.
after?
Yeah, this is going along for a while.
Like we're talking 2 years after the crime.
We're talking a while.
Okay.
It was a good amount of
You
time.
can see how much work goes into a particular case by a detective's folder, can't you?
Yes, you can. Yeah.
And you put in a lot of work. You said your
I did.
case on this one, that's just the one case that happened in Manhattan, that lady, homeless lady in the park, you had an encyclopedia on that case.
Yes, I did.
All right.
Yeah. And so I went down to Miami. I looked through their folders. I ended up re-interviewing their victims.
Down in Miami.
Down in Miami. I went through their crime scenes. I started, looking for all these certain things that were going on. And we put it out on America's Most Wanted. At the time, they told us that the show had received the most responses of any episode that they ever had. They interviewed the victim. She agreed to be interviewed.
Oh, wow.
And a good percentage were just people that wanted to reach out and help her. They wanted to be there for this woman. And what happened was we ended up getting a hit on this guy, and he was in New York. He was in Queens.
You got a hit identification
later. Yes, we got an identification. No. We got a hit. I got an
DNA.
ID on him.
So somewhere along the line, he committed a crime where his DNA was taken, put into CODIS, and it matched up.
Right, in another park-like setting with a woman. In this case, I believe it was a robbery. And he ended up being sent to the...
Would you just stop for 1 second and just... This is like classic MO stuff, which is so interesting to me, and just for our audience that aren't police. MO is modus operandi, which stands for method of operation. Perps like to do the same thing every single time because they feel safer doing a crime a specific way. And what you're talking about, he's doing a crime in parks near the water. Something
also,
in the
too, because the
makeup.
person that's committing the crime, sometimes they have a story or a fantasy that they want to fulfill, especially with sex crimes. So they're always trying to make that story perfect, that storyline perfect in their head.
No, absolutely. But
Yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
That's really interesting, though, that, and in the investigation, you're searching this type of thing, parks near water. And that's not by
Because,
accident,
No.
I was going to say this for later, but at some point, with your experience in handling these type of cases, I would imagine that whether you know it or not, you become a profiler. The way you're looking at the cases, you subconsciously or maybe consciously begin through experience profiling your cases, and that's why you did the work about looking in a park by water.
Even when you solve a case, you go back, and this is one of those cases. We ended up getting a DNA hit. We ended up getting him in custody. He's in custody. And we later found out, just on a side note, that he was one of the people that was incarcerated in Cuba that they sent over in the flotillas. What was it, 1980?
Yeah.
And he came over to Florida.
Marielitos.
Yeah.
That was
Cuban
it,
boat.
Marielitos, yeah.
But what's interesting is I went back and I looked through, his background. And I was like, where was it that I could have come across him without the DNA? Right? What else could I have done differently or that I had done but didn't pick up that would have identified him other than the DNA? And it turned out that I had done this check of crimes committed in parks by the water against women for a period of time. And and nothing came through. I mean, I looked at suspects. I started, doing backgrounds. I had a lot of different suspects that were given to me. I spoke to other departments that had cases that were similar between Florida and here because I thought he's working his way up. And what I found was that the check I did, if I had redone it again for another time period, I would have identified it.
That's amazing.
But earlier?
It was later.
Oh, if you
it was after.
It's funny. That's a great thing to do as an investigator, to critique yourself. So, and I'm not saying you made a mistake, but it might say, hey, I did this on this case and it worked. Let me try it again on another case.
It's true. Yeah. But you're talking about what you said is that, they like to extend. I mean, there's two things that come to mind that stand out for sex crimes, predators. And one is they are doing exactly what you said. They're extending. I committed this crime. I've lived it probably 1,000 times over what I just did or what I have done, a couple of months before or years before to this woman. I want to do it again. I want to do it again as recidivist, but I want to do it again in a similar fashion that can extend that. And the second part, as we know, is, they like to collect trophies.
Yeah, I was just going to say that a lot of murderers or serial killers like to keep trophies. Yeah.
Right. Same with sex offenders.
Yeah.
Taking something from the victim with them to remind them of what they have done.
Right, to relive the experience.
Right.
The DNA was such a big factor, and you found the average person knows something about DNA, or they believe they know about the collection of it. It's such a difficult thing to understand, but yet most Americans, probably based off of TV shows, a movie that they watched, or just reading stories in the paper, they finally get a hold of what DNA is, and they trust it. And if you bring it into a case, there's a high conviction rate, I would imagine, right?
There's a very high conviction rate, to the point where now, defense attorneys are trying to find, first they were like, we want this, and then when they realized, how badly it goes for them.
Right. Well, I got news for you. It's going to get worse for criminals, because now all of a sudden video evidence is becoming... I was down in Florida on vacation, and when I watched the news at nighttime, the first of 5 or 6 stories that they showed, which was basically all the crime stories that they had time for, they all were accompanied by video evidence. Then we had the case here in Brooklyn that's going on trial right now, the junior, the boy that was, the 15-year-old boy that was killed. He was hacked up in front of the bodega after running away from a couple of blocks from like 10 or 15 rival gang members.
So that.
The video evidence in that case is, I've never seen anything like it. It just seemed like for some reason that store had every angle covered, clear, beautiful color footage, really good pictures of the people's faces, and not including the people that are recording on their own now, the witnesses in the streets. So if you're a criminal out there, get a job at a pot dispensary or something, man, legalize it, because between DNA and this video evidence, it's going to be hard to get away with crimes in the future.
I know. Back in the day, we always looked for video and cases, but then you'd retrieve it and then you'd look at it. It was pretty grainy.
It was shitty, but it's different now.
It is different.
It's so different right now. And you know what? Shame on anybody who still has a system that you're getting that grainy black and white video. Right. I'm watching the show Barry, which is great, but in the first season, you guys watching that?
No, but I might pick it up.
It's with what is his name? Chris Hader. You don't know Barry? Bill Hader. Yeah. He's great. He's a great comic, but he's also a great actor, and he plays an assassin. But he gets involved in a case where it brings him to an acting school, and now he doesn't want to be an assassin anymore. He wants to be an actor. And it's like this struggle to get out of assassinating people and become a full-time actor. But there's one thing where he had to assassinate somebody, and all they had was this blurry black and white footage, and it reminded me of the old days of pulling camera footage and just getting this shitty grain and bringing it down to
get it enhanced.
Enhanced to Taru. Yeah, that's when he used to lose a guy for a day, right?
I said
tells the story how he used to lose a guy for a day.
That
was a great place to hang out.
Forget about it. We had a murder on 145th Street in a 3-2 in a Dunkin' Donuts, and it had the greatest video, and the guy matched a pattern of robberies in Manhattan South. So we're saying that's the guy. And 2 people identified the guy from Manhattan South as the guy, and it was a mis-ID. And we never, ever caught that guy. And I'm wondering if the 3-2.
So
is
even
still-
though you had the great video,
Yeah.
and it looked exactly like the guy, so that's where the DNA comes
Yeah.
in. So back to
Right.
DNA.
And we tested, we sent the video even to get enhanced more to the FBI.
And that's why you cover all the bases when you do a case.
Yeah.
That's why you, even though you have something like DNA or you have you don't rely on it because you never know what's going to happen.
It's true. I mean, some of the cases, people seem to think that DNA solves cases, and DNA is a tremendous tool, but it doesn't solve cases. It's just, it provides tremendous leads and everything else, but there's a lot more work involved.
Well, sometimes there's DNA there, but it should be there. You got a guy who kills his spouse or his living girlfriend. His DNA's all over the place. You know why? Because he lived there. So it doesn't matter whether you find DNA. That's a case where DNA is going to be useless.
Right.
You know, if you're pulling DNA out of the house, now if you got another location that they might have been frequenting and he denies it, whatever. But sometimes DNA is not going to, you need more than DNA.
We had a case like that in a 2-8. The husband or the boyfriend definitely killed this woman, but he had every excuse. Yeah, I came in, I was trying to do CPR because
Right.
he had blood all over him, and we couldn't, we couldn't disprove what he said,
Let me ask you a
Basically
question,
got away
since
with it.
we're still going heavy on the DNA here. What is your opinion on Ancestry.com and like 23andMe?
I love it. I mean, obviously.
Would you ever send your DNA in?
Me? Yes. I've
If you
never
were the
committed a
average-
crime. I have no problem.
The average person. Okay, let's say if you were a criminal, would you send your DNA
But, I mean,
in?
do people understand what's going
Tell
on?
us what's happening with it.
What's going on is that people see this on TV. They want to understand what their background is and everything, and they submit their DNA so they can get a profile for themselves, and they can start, I guess, showing them where they came from and whatnot. It's interesting. I'm not completely sold on it myself. But what you're doing,
Meaning that you don't believe it's true, that they're going through the work of figuring that out.
I don't know. I don't
You
know
have to
if it's
send
true
a
or
picture
not.
of yourself with it. Imagine if
you with your
they wanted your
Metcalf
DNA on with a picture.
They'll take you to
Yeah,
Metcalf
you're
to get
white.
your DNA.
You're white. It looks like it might be.
What's your name? Okay, let's come with that.
Mark's DNA surreptitiously from his med hat.
So,
But what happens is you're profiling, providing a profile not just for you, but for all of your relatives.
Yeah.
and that are blood relatives, and that's what's going on. They're getting hits
That's
from
why
that,
they say,
which is great.
Familial
tell me how that
DNA
works, though,
Right.
because
familial DNA isn't yet approved to use by the criminal justice system yet, though.
Right, but here you have is your tremendous lead.
Right,
I
of
mean,
course, of
I mean,
course.
I know I've got your DNA in this, Ancestry.com, and somebody that's related to you. Now we
wait a minute.
We
The perp has his DNA encoders, but I find out. Well, how do you find out that my aunt Sophie took a DNA test?
But no, what you're skipping is that it's not matching up to the perpetrator because his DNA is not in the system.
Okay.
It's showing that this guy who submitted for Ancestry.com, someone related to him is matching this evidence.
Right. So
you had
it's
him
gotta
as a
be
suspect.
family member.
Right.
You might have had him as a suspect anyway, but now you find out that his family member. But how do you find out that somebody's family member submitted for DNA for Ancestry.com? Are they in a database somewhere else that the police have access to?
Honestly, I don't know.
I don't know how do you
don't-
say you as a law enforcement officer, how do you take a DNA sample of a suspect and have it compared in what he's talking about in Ancestry DNA? How do you do that?
Well,
I think
you're not taking it, comparing it to the ancestry. What you're doing is, you're starting to look at everyone who's related to this subject. And usually, I think they tend to be more cold cases, old cases.
Yeah.
Well, they
And-
got that guy who was the serial
On a homicide.
rapist murderer in
Yeah.
California.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
he did
right.
like 50 rapes. I don't know how
Yeah.
many murders. Yeah.
All old cases. Tremendous
It's
that they got
interesting.
him.
My Aunt Sophie sends her DNA. Let's say.
You have an Aunt
This stupid
Sophie?
bitch. And I told her, you know what I do for a living, right? I'm a criminal. I deal drugs. I murder people. Whatever you do, don't send your
submit
DNA
your DNA
in.
and I'll pay
And this
extra.
fucking asshole did it anyway. So now my Aunt Sophie's DNA, it goes to Ancestry.com. I would
Right.
imagine they have, I don't know, what the fuck are they doing with it? They're breaking it up. I guess they look at it and they break it up, and they have different codes for where part of the world you come to. But then there's there's an option there for you to find your relatives as well. That's what I heard. So now I check that option. It's more money to do it too, but I also want to find out who's related to me. out there that I don't know about, which winds up fucking up a lot of families, by the way. You find out your mother cheated on your father, whatever it is. It's screwing families up all across the country, the world, I would imagine. But now, how do I know this person's DNA? Do I know they're related? And that's why I'm checking to see if anybody in his family did put in DNA? Am I checking his relatives? I don't even know how they do that.
I don't know what arrangement. Obviously, there's an arrangement that's in place where these companies like Ancestry is providing the DNA that they're obtaining and introducing it into the data bank, introducing it to the national data bank.
Now, but has the legal profession challenged Ancestry DNA? Have they challenged their right to let law enforcement use that database?
That's a good question. And I think what happens is it goes back to you taking that sample surreptitiously.
Right. Okay.
Right? The guys, we're following him. He spits on the sidewalk, and there we are scraping up the spit off the sidewalk, which has happened.
Yeah.
Well, in all fairness.
But the first thing we do after we get somebody into custody is we get a court order to take the DNA again.
Right.
So that we're not depending on that spit on the sidewalk as your evidence. People seem to think, well, there you go. All you had was a cup of coffee. What if you switched? What if you don't? No. Time out. The first thing they do is get a court immediately at arraignment, get something up before a judge, getting him to sign off on an order saying he will provide a DNA sample.
All right, but in that token, why couldn't you do this? I have a suspect. All right, and I have DNA, but this guy's not in CODIS, all right? But I am aware of his family, or I do some research and I find out, and I tell him, I said, listen, your nephew or your brother, whatever, is a rapist or he's a murderer. Would you mind submitting a DNA? And they do, or I surreptitiously collect DNA from a family member of my suspect. And now it's a close enough hit between the family members that are very close. I would imagine it's got to be a brother or sister, because even when you go to first cousin, there could be a huge argument. Mom, pop, I get their DNA, that word, or they volunteer to give it for some reason.
But here,
isn't that good enough?
I'm straight. You go up to a mom and dad and their kids, and that I never committed a crime. I've worked my whole life. I'm retired. I'm a great citizen. Well, we're doing an investigation and something's come up, and we are asking you, without giving the details. I'm not one to give out information. No. For example, in an interrogation, I never use the word DNA. Never. No. Because now all of a sudden the guy's coming up with all sorts of stories in his head to explain something. Never. But you go up to someone and say, look, there's an investigation, there was an incident, blah, blah, blah. Would you be willing to provide DNA? And the guy's like, yeah, fine. Here you go. I'll sign it off, everything. Now all of a sudden you get a familiar hit, right? You didn't go and say, oh, your brothers or your cousins wanted for a homicide or something. I mean, the guy's going to be in a wind and in Chile by tomorrow.
What I'm saying is, like, let's say you had an apartment building, girl gets raped, you think it's the super. You collect the DNA from the scene, you have that DNA, but you don't know the super's not being cooperative. You don't have anything to link him to him except your suspicion. Let's say you collected the super lives with his mother. You collected something that she was consuming.
I'm not aware of any cases where that's gone on, but I'm just saying it hasn't.
No, I don't
Theoretically, why can't you do that?
I know at least when Chief Pulaski was the chief of detectives, he wouldn't touch familial DNA,
right?
Because it hasn't been vetted yet by the legal profession, so they're afraid of challenges. And this was way before, of course.
But this is what's happening right now with the Ancestry 23andMe.
Well, I'm saying this was way before that. Yeah.
But now,
but I don't know if the legal profession has challenged it yet. I don't know.
I don't have.
I just have a funny feeling that the freaking government is collecting all this DNA. They own two companies. One's called 23andMe. The other one's called Ancestry.com. They're calling you up every 5 minutes to get your voice saying hello or asshole or whatever other choice words you choose to tell this recording. They know what you like now because you can't stop liking things on social media. They know where you fall politically.
That's right.
Because you can't shut up about it.
You're on a podcast called Police Off the Cuff.
Right. And then they got video. They're going to have video evidence of you everywhere right now. The stuff that you post up yourself.
Right, and they're profiling your face, your
Just
eyes, your
waiting
ears.
around. Now you
Facial
give them the DNA
recognition.
on top of it.
Exactly.
So just for whenever they need a crime solved. And the first person that comes to my mind is that idiot from Florida that supposedly sent out those bombs that didn't work to all the politicians. He just pled guilty, by the way.
Good.
But I still don't believe it was him. I just think it was a patsy. I look at that guy. He couldn't put together tie his own shoes, let alone put 16 bombs that don't work. And where is he putting all this together? In his back of his van that he's sleeping in?
You see, here's the thing. I'm on still the good guy side. And in as much as we're challenging this, I'm always looking and hoping that we're going to find other avenues like familial DNA or whatnot that can be another source of information that a detective can go to and obtain information and find suspects. And although people are, I don't want this to be obtained or that, social media. Social media is a great source of information for investigators.
Huge.
Dude, I remember because I was a comic and I was using social media way before all these other detectives knew even what MySpace was. I was using it to promote my shows. And what happened was I used to show the guys in my squad how to use MySpace and Twitter, and then it was Facebook and Mi Gente and Black Planet and all these dating sites.
YouTube.
Right.
Yeah, I was showing them how to use it. And then somehow Pulaski got wind of it, and I had to do a presentation in front of him, which scared the shit out of me, by the way. Because when you tell him a story, it always... Forget it. Anyway, the point is I was in front of a big boss, and I had to do my and he liked it a lot. So I was, next thing you know, I'm in the training unit teaching everybody how to catch bad guys off of social media.
Great source.
Yeah, it was good. And now, even though the funny thing is, even though they know, they can't stop posting.
Right.
It's true.
They can't stop because you know what? If it's not on video anymore, there used to be a time where you wanted to get away with a crime. And now it seems like the people like in the hood,
brag about it,
in the hood, if they don't have a body, meaning they didn't kill somebody, they're not a real gangster.
Yeah.
People is like, oh, why do you have to shoot him? Because he wants to kill somebody. He needs to get this body under his belt so he has that street cred. It's a mentality. You're not a gangster until you got a body.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I don't even know where this point was going. I got it.
Social media. They're bragging about what they did.
That's true.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's exactly where it was.
I busted some guy's ass last night.
I just got pissed off for real in my head,
Yeah,
and then I lost my track.
I mean, you
Thinking
see
about being on
videos.
the police department again.
You see sexual assaults on video and women unconscious.
I know.
And
There
them
was
attacking
cases
her
this past year.
and they posted on social media.
Running a train.
Yeah.
Running a train on a girl and posting it up live, Facebook Live.
Yeah.
It's insane.
But it's
Thank God.
tremendous
Thank
source of
God for
information.
stupidity, huh?
Oh,
I agree.
But you depend on it. There's actually another tool that is really, I guess from a criminal point of view, is scary, but from our law enforcement point of view, is amazing. Google has this like search thing where they can search an area and find out every single car that was in that area, every cell phone that was in that area, and anything that creates an electronic signal at a specific time. So if you're investigating a homicide or a rape, you could determine whether your perp, in fact, was in the area that you're looking at. Unbelievable,
It's
right?
interesting. This is a good little story if you got a minute.
We got a minute. What are we doing?
We got a couple of minutes.
This is what we're doing.
We're talking.
How many more minutes we got left, Andrew?
We had a guy who was doing gunpoint rapes and robberies, and there was a pattern identified, but we're not in the DNA yet. And it's downtown Manhattan, down in the 9th, and over by NYU, and also in Queens. And he's feeling the heat because it's catching a lot of press. Homicide and special victims are working together. We've got teams all over the place working on it. And you get a major case, a lot of patterns drawing attention. You're just a cog in the wheel, really. You're doing what you can. And it wasn't my pattern. And what happened was on the last one, he takes her down a stairwell in the West Village, and then he rapes her, and he takes her cell phone, and he's like, "This is too much heat. I'm getting out of here." But he keeps her cell phone. And you're talking about the hit, and he gets on a bus, and he's traveling through Connecticut. So, two of the guys from Manhattan South Homicide and a sergeant from Manhattan South Homicide, and myself, being the sex crimes guy, we jump in a car, 2 cars, and we're starting to get cell site hits cutting across Connecticut. And we're tracking it.
But they're always like 10 or 15 minutes behind.
Oh, we're behind by hours.
Yeah.
We're behind by hours.
Because I was chasing the phone one time, and I was getting a signal 10 to 15 minutes on a delay.
Yeah.
Is there a machine that you use to chase the signal?
Taru tells you.
What, they give you a phone that you can follow that other phone?
They see it on their screen, and they'll tell you the phone was just pinging at this cell site.
But as you're traveling, on your travels, how do you keep getting the updates?
You call them or they call you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not that scientific.
No. And
Not yet.
No.
This run's very interesting. I mean, we cut across Connecticut. We end up in Rhode Island, where we're ending up in a strip club. So it's like, all right, great. I'm getting paid to be in a strip
Does the
club.
department give you singles?
I needed to get reimbursed, and even more.
$1,000. The girls were hot, Chief.
Singles in the G-string.
And what was more convenient on this is that the attached to the strip club was a motel. I mean, how much more convenient can you get than that? And we get there, we start talking to people inside the strip club, and we find out that there's this guy who fits the description who's passing out money. And we're not getting any cell site hits anymore. And we end up getting an ID, we end up getting a room, we recover evidence, we recover the weapon. The guy goes, he ends up leaving Rhode Island. I think he goes up to Massachusetts, and then he comes back. And we're in Rhode Island, like, waiting for him. Because we know he left his stuff here.
He's going to come back, yeah.
And so we're staking it out, and he shows up. And I'm the one who's going to do the interrogation. And this is very interesting.
Wouldn't happen any other way.
No,
Thank you.
Definitely like Eddie
I
to do
appreciate
the
it.
interrogation.
So I'm questioning him. We're going on, and I'm making a lot of headway. And it turns out there's a number of cases in Manhattan, and he starts giving up all this stuff after a number of hours, and Queens. And so I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, everything's a wrap. And I'm thinking to myself, and I said, you know something? I'm going to try something out. And the guy's in his early 20s, and I said, this is how I view your life in 3 years. Now, how do we really view his life in 3 years?
Yeah.
You know, pick a state maximum facility, and that's your life.
He's going to be bigger. He's going to be more diesel.
Yeah.
And,
Instead, I spend the next 20 minutes talking about how he's going to be, you know, engaged or married. He's going to be living in Yonkers. Sorry.
I love it.
I tell him what his apartment looks like and everything. I said, you're going to work as a security guard, which is like the police. You're going to do work that's similar to us. And you're going to be doing this kind of thing and that kind of thing and blah, blah, blah. This is all you're going to want to get this past you. I said, but then the last thing you're going to want to hear is this. A knock at the door. And you open the door, and who's standing there but Eddie? And I said, you should have told me about this other case. And you know what the guy does? He says,
man.
you know what? He said there was a sodomy robbery at gunpoint that I did up in the Bronx. And we contact the Bronx, and sure as can be, there it is. There's his case. Well, this gets better. You're going to love this. So the guy, we're done. I get it all signed off and written up and everything. And we finally go to sleep. I think we were up like 32 hours at this point. And he waives extradition, and we start coming back. And I got a detective sitting next to him, and he's in the back seat, and he's cuffed up in the front. And I love eating Fig Newtons. So I'm sitting in the front. I'm not driving, and I'm eating Fig Newtons.
Out of all the freaking cookies you could have.
I'm sorry, it's me.
I like the Milano.
Do you like
chocolate?
And you like the fig Newtons?
like
Not
the
even the
fig-
flavor fig? See, I can deal with the flavor Fig Newtons. But the fig?
I like them both. I like them both.
Fig Newtons?
I like the Fig Newtons.
Oh, man.
So the guy asks me in the back seat. So I look in the rearview mirror, and the homicide guy is sitting next to him, and he's giving me this look. And I'm like, all right, fine. And I start tossing over my shoulder Fig Newtons, and the guy's catching him. He's eating the Fig Newtons. And he's like, this guy's committed all of these crimes. Why are you doing this? I'm like, look, I got to be at a different level.
Sure.
All right? Now the DNA kicks in. The guy committed...
Who questioned you? The other cop?
The other detective. Not at the time, later.
Why
After
are
the fact.
you treating him so well?
Why are you treating him like this? I'm like, look, it's a mindset.
And it's the right mindset.
And I'm in the
right
mindset.
Yeah.
And I'm tossing him Fig Newtons. What happens is his DNA gets uploaded, and he committed another sexual assault down in the 7th, down around Pitt Street in Stanton.
Near the precinct.
Yeah, right near the precinct. Yeah. And the guy who he committed the crime with was connected to other sexual assaults and a whole series of armed robberies up in the Upper West Side.
Wow.
In the 2-0. So the DA's talking to the lawyer's talking to the DA, defense attorney. They bring him into a conference room down, at 80 Center Street in Manhattan DA's office. And the guy walks in, and he's like, "Hi, Eddie."
Big Newtons on you.
Big Newtons. And the guy says to me, "You're like the attorney's like rolling his eyes." He's like, "Oh God,
oh no!"
And he agrees that
The defense attorney?
Yeah.
Oh,
He agrees
that's not good for him.
that he's going to cooperate on this one case. They cut a deal on a one case.
Mm-hmm.
And so we throw him in a car, and it's a guy from robbery, and it's my old partner, Alan, and myself. We get in the car with the perp. And he's trying to show us places where he was connected to this guy. So we end up...
The guy that he was doing the other assaults
That he did the other
robberies
assaults,
with?
right. But
Okay.
he wasn't doing the other robberies with him. The guy was doing them on his own.
But
Okay.
the guy's
He only
at
did
this
one
point,
work
The
with him.
guy's not ID'd for the robbery.
The guy is definitely not ID'd.
Okay.
His DNA's not in a data bank for the 3 cases. We have no leads on this. And we're driving up past the old Yankee Stadium, and the guy says to me, "I always wanted a Yankee hat." And I wasn't driving, of
Daddy.
course. And I said, "Pull the car over." And I walked over. I dropped like $20, whatever it was. I bought a Yankee hat. I went over and I snapped it on his head. I said, "Now you got a Yankee hat." And he gave us information. We ended up finding that second guy.
Wow.
He took a plea, I think, of like 34 to life.
Beautiful.
And the second piece, who we never would have identified for quite a while, I don't think, took 25 to life on that.
For all you young detectives out there, aspiring detectives, this is why you treat a perp good.
Yeah.
Right? Look,
I used to have. I was a Met fan, and I had one guy I had to pull a confession out of, but he had a Yankee hat on. So I worked with a guy. I said, "Hey, let me borrow your Yankee hat for a second." So I put my Yankee hat on, and when I talked to him,
Yeah.
oh no, it was I couldn't. It was a jersey.
A
that
jersey.
I put on while he had the hat on, because we can do that. You're a detective. You can come in with it. Oh shit! And then we just started. I know a lot about baseball, so we just started talking about baseball.
Great.
About the Yankees, and even though I hate the Yankees, I swallowed it that day. I put on the. I think I actually have a Polaroid picture with me wearing that thing, because everybody was like, "Oh, you're gonna go on fire. You're gonna break out in hives because you're wearing it." But yeah, whatever you got to do, man.
That's
Whatever
exactly
you got to
You know
do.
what's so fascinating, and I always admired the detectives from Special Victims. Not all of them, but the best ones were the very best on the job, I thought. And I remember John Savino.
Excellent
who was the first
detective.
guy, I thought was an amazing detective. And he actually wrote a book called The Rape Investigation Handbook. And I asked him one time, because I'm a student of life as well as of criminal justice, I said, "John, tell me about your interrogation technique." And he says, "Well," he goes, "I like to start when they woke up in the morning and to go through their day."
Okay.
And have them go right through their day till the very time of the crime. Because a lot of times, they can't remember, they can't remember little things, or they will remember little things, and then all of a sudden they get to the time and then they can't remember anything.
Right.
You know what I mean?
True.
So you get a feel as to, are they telling the truth? No, you're lying, because from 8 o'clock in the morning till 5, you were so sharp. You knew everybody. At the time of the crime, all of a sudden you couldn't remember shit.
Right.
So, and then he would challenge the guy with that. And I was like, this is a thinking, smart, methodical detective.
It is.
And you use the psychological ploys that are brilliant. I mean, and you had your own style. And lots of detectives, even in homicide, some of the very best, Joe the Lip. I mean, Joe Trent.
Yes, I do.
used to just love watching him interrogate people.
There's so many different facets to investigative work, because you have the guy who is great at going out and collecting evidence in the street. You know what I'm saying? I used to work with a guy. He had a whole bunch of little papers. All his case was in like ripped up, shredded pieces of paper, him talking to people on the street, and there was 1,000 of them. I never even knew how he was going to collect it together and make a
If
case.
you're going to be complimentary, you can even say the guy's name if you want.
No, I'm going to stay
You
off
can
of it.
hold off if you want.
Because it wasn't really that skilled that I didn't feel like he was a good interrogator. That's why my point was you can have a certain skill set. It's almost like when you grade a basketball player. Moves good to his right, weak to his left. Has a great 13-foot jump shot. Not good going to the hole. Great rebound. You break it down, and then there's some guys who score off the charts on everything, and the best investigators are going to be the ones that are really good at every aspect of the investigation. You know,
Have all the tools.
Yeah.
yeah, and that's a biggie. That's a biggie. Getting even though the confessions, especially because we talked about this earlier about just the sentiment with law enforcement and nobody believing the cops anymore. I don't really know how effective a confession is. I don't think it could stand on its own anymore at all. But you put that with DNA, you put that with some video that might not be the best, whatever. Now you got a complete case, like you were talking about.
You know, you put that with common sense because you know jurors still have to have some common sense, and you know they
You hope.
You hope, yeah.
The way they use coercion, though, now the way they throw that out on every single confession, no matter what it is,
And all felonies are videotaped.
it's always
now.
he was coerced.
Yeah.
How many hours was he sitting there? Did he have to maybe
Did
pee
he have
once?
his coloring book? Did he have his med hat?
you look back at the interrogations, and the reality is, coercion is not really part of a successful program.
No.
Nobody's coerced. Nobody's pressuring. It's just methodically going through things and looking for an opening, and not letting somebody, you know, I wasn't even there. Well, you can't obviously go to B if you can't get them at A.
Yeah, but you say that,
But
and
you still
there's a whole show on Netflix that I was watching based off of false confessions. That you take them. I think there's 3 cases, especially from this one particular town somewhere where they fucked up 3 homicides, and it was most of it was based off of bullshit interrogations, leaving the person sitting there
Shoddy
for
police work,
16
really.
hours. Mixing them up, getting them tired, promising them they were going to go home, food, this, that, and the other. There's a way to do it. And there's a way to, because these 2 kids that I'm talking about, if anybody's seen the Netflix special, they both wound up confessing, but basically to one thing or agreeing. They had one thing in common, and then they had, in between their 2 stories, and the rest of it was a disaster. But these detectives, they chose to just focus on that one aspect of it and rode that the whole way, and they wound up getting convicted. And the DNA, I think, saved them in the end. But just the fact that could happen, there's different ways to do the confessions, and maybe that's why the general public doesn't trust them as much as they used to. But it's also because there's so much other evidence out there now. DNA it blew it up.
We go to sex crimes. Everyone expects there to be DNA, and that's the problem also, because many times there isn't DNA in a sex crimes case.
They call that the CSI effect, right? From watching
That's exactly
CSI,
what they call it.
Everyone thinks that there's got to be physical evidence in every single case.
Well, that's
And
because they hear stuff like you can't enter a room and exit a room without leaving DNA behind. So if they were there, that's just one of the things that comes along early on when you're learning about DNA. Oh, did you know that you can't come in, you're going to leave something. If there's skin cells, a hair is going to fall off, there's going to be something there. The only question is, you might not find it.
Well, we had a case where I mentioned before that 90-year-old Holocaust survivor was murdered in his apartment, and crime scene went through that apartment, didn't lift a single fingerprint. And I was like, how is this possible?
But it is.
It is. Yeah, it is. I'm not
And it
blaming
did.
crime scene.
It happened.
It did happen. But
Smears.
Yeah, they just
oily fingers.
no usable fingerprints, and a jury doesn't want to hear that.
No. And, not only is the effect that everybody expects to have this in a case, but now with, when the DNA all started to develop and everything, it changed it changed the way we process crime scenes. I mean, crime scenes were always processed, and they always did a thorough job. And it was always tremendous jobs that I had with detectives that came from the crime scene unit.
Yeah.
But it became, we're going to take it to the next level, and we did, because you started looking for even more possible places where we could obtain DNA.
Right.
And some of it was successful. The guy, I remembered he was going through the credit cards. He had the victim shower
where to find
afterwards,
evidence.
and he tried to eliminate all of his evidence.
Yes.
But at the same time, he was going through credit cards at one point.
Right.
And, we obtained evidence from the credit card.
That, because that is why an interview of a victim is so important.
Critical.
To find out every single thing the perpetrator did. And you hit it on the head. Yeah. You wouldn't know that unless you interviewed her. She said, he started going through my credit cards.
Right.
And there's another place you can get a fingerprint or DNA from. Right. Unbelievable.
Sex crimes is like I appeared on Law and Order SVU, by the way.
Just a little plug for Mark. You got any other shows you want to plug while we're...
I played, was George, the evidence clerk. The DA's office. Yeah, man. I auditioned 20 years for that part. No, because Law & Order's been on the air forever.
Yeah,
and like, as an actor in New York City, they say you never, you're not an actor in New York until you've been on Law & Order.
Right.
And I had done other shows, much bigger parts too. But after like auditioning 20 times, at least once a year for 20 years, between all the different shows, and never getting it, a lot of times it was a part for a cop,
Right.
one line, and I was a cop. I was just like, just give me the part. What are we doing here?
You need to
one
do
line.
this part,
Right.
you know?
I'm in shape. I look like, just give me the part so I can say I got it.
Is it the hair?
But I got it. I wound up getting it. So what do you ever watch the show?
You know, I did in the beginning, but then it was like you're going home from work and you're putting on work.
Yeah. I can
You know,
see that. Yeah.
honestly, I'd rather watch Cheers or something back in the day, or MASH or something. I mean, I just can't picture going home, throwing on the TV too often, and watching a show. Although in the beginning, I remembered when they were putting that show together, they came to our office. I don't know if you remember this, and they stayed in our office for a few months, and or maybe a month or two, and they were filming us. They were watching how we interacted, and just to try to get that whole feel. And they've taken pictures and whatnot. And, this is a funny side story because I had when I worked in the DA's office after I worked in doing sex crimes, I had a paralegal, and she was coming into work on the subway. Mm-hmm. And there was a woman next to her with a binder open. And the woman was flipping through photos, and it was all photos of me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And she said, do you mind? I work for this guy. I mean, she didn't work for me. She worked for the DA's office. Mm-hmm. And she says, oh, yeah, he's one of our character references for Law & Order's sex
probably
crimes,
based
special victims.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
Right.
what else are you going to do?
Mm-hmm. But
have you ever
saw a lot
watched
of
the
cases.
show and saw a case that you were involved in on the show?
That's
I'm
what
sure
I was
that
just
happened
about to
plenty
say.
of times.
We used to sit there and look and say, hey, John, that's Sandy, that's your case. John, that's your case. Oh, look at these cases, because they pay attention.
They get it for free.
Yeah.
They're making millions, and they got these cases for free.
They're just watching the news.
That's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah. They're not interviewing. They're not asking you about the case.
No, they interview people about the case. In fact,
The detectives?
the double murder that we had in the 2-3 on East 102nd Street in December 1st, 2001. Before I knew that was on Law & Order. Someone gave that to him, a detective. I know who it is, but it wasn't even from the 2-3. He gave that case to Law & Order, and I was like, that's,
Why, did it make the paper?
Oh, it was there was a front page story. It was
I mean, my argument is that they see it, and if they reach out, be like, anybody want to help us? We're interested in this case.
Yeah,
Obviously, somebody's going to be like, I'll do it.
The press never knows the real story.
They don't care. They just want to buff out.
Yeah, you love when you sit and you read an article on something you're working, and you're like, oh, that's wrong, and that's wrong. And
well, it's mostly wrong.
Well,
I mean, have you ever read a story in the paper that
Totally
they got it right?
I'm sure they have.
Because you go to a crime scene and you want to interview, the cops will never talk to you. So you're getting everything hearsay from somebody that, I know somebody told me that they... And that's what these reporters are basing their case on. I mean, not that they have another option. They got to produce something.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And if the cops won't talk to them, what are they going to do?
Yeah.
We had a double murder in the 2-3 with this girl, 17-year-old girl, and her boyfriend. Connie Lung, she was Asian, and her boyfriend was Black Haitian. They murdered both her parents and threw them in the East River.
Wow.
And there was tremendous interest later on for it to be on all kinds of different shows. And they only wanted it because they thought there was a racial angle. That the parents didn't accept him, and that's why they murdered him. And and even the Times printed that, and we told the Times, that's not true. We don't know where you got that from. You guys made that up. And the Times, oh, no, so-and-so. No, you're lying. You made that up.
Right.
And you can really see where the press just makes stuff up.
It's annoying that we get the race thing is such it's just a bait.
They made it up. They totally
made
it up.
We'll call it clickbait. Yeah. It'll make you look at the stories, and that's all that you want to do now is because all these stories, they're all going on Facebook, on social media.
It's true.
And it's clickbait. What is going to interest you? Another racist story.
I just got a call about that case about 2 months ago, and another TV wanted to do that case. And she goes, oh, I said, that never happened. She goes, but I said, I don't care what the New York Times said. They made that up. That was not a factor in the case.
Right.
you know. So then they weren't interested in it anymore.
I had some show called me up and they wanted to do talk to cops about guns. So they were like, "What do you feel about guns?" I says, "Well, I never carry off duty. I'm not a big fan of guns. I did it for my job. It was part of my costume. What else do you need to know?" And they're like, "Oh, you're against shooting people?" Yeah, 100%. I never want to shoot anybody. What are you, a fucking idiot?
Who wants to shoot
But of course,
anyone?
obviously, I didn't get the part. But they wanted this overzealous,
Yes,
over-the-top
of course.
guy
So they
who's
could
going to
make him
say
look like a
stupid shit
fool.
on their reality show.
Yeah.
It wasn't going to be me.
I mean, it's not sex crimes related, but I can remember being at a fire that was, again, over in the 13th. I don't know why I was there, but I was in uniform, and you saw the press, interviewing people regarding the fire. I think there was a fatality.
Yeah.
And it might have even been like a hotel where they kept people that they couldn't put them in shelters and stuff.
Sure.
It's like a
hostel.
A hostel setup. And as they're interviewing people, they're like, okay, and they're pre-interviewing people, and they're like, okay, get the cameras ready. They're getting a tryout, and they're like, okay, are you ready? Yes. Oh, I can't believe what happened, and crying, this one died, blah, 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 blah. And then, they're doing the interview, and she's doing a phenomenal job, and they're like, okay, cut. And the person was fine again. It's like, thank you. That's exactly what we're looking for.
It's like Anderson Cooper standing in 3 feet of water in New Orleans when there was only 2 inches of rain.
Right. Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, they're setting the stage up with the military. The soldiers are fighting in the background, and they open the scene up a little bit more, and you can see they're creating stories because they're not news anymore. Right. It's not news. It's
entertainment.
Picking up these stories and running with them in opinion pieces. You got 4 blowhards sitting in a room talking about the same shit. It's not even really happening.
Yeah.
This is what happened with the Mueller case. All these stations, they can't let go of the fact that there was no
collusion.
Yeah, no collusion, no obstruction.
Sometimes I wonder how many of the articles are written in advance, and then they go around and they just find a couple of soundbite interviews.
They exonerated Hillary Clinton before they even interviewed her. There was a drawn-up letter letting her off the hook before the date was on there. That fucking idiot Comey. That's the leader of the FBI, by the way.
I know.
Your fearless leader, that fucking idiot. He's dating a letter. Leaving a paper trail of stupid notes. What an idiot that guy was.
We don't want to get too political to the right or too to the left.
Listen, the facts are the fact. That guy fucked everything up. Yeah. He came out 2 weeks before the election and buried Hillary Clinton. That was the last nail in her coffin. Where did that come from? Well, why were you covering your ass? Remember that?
Yeah,
right before.
A lot of mistakes were made.
That was a huge mistake.
You talk about Bill and sex crimes.
Yeah.
And, depending on, the political agenda at the time, depends on whether, you're a real victim or you're just somebody who's harassing somebody.
Yeah.
Well, why did you bring that up again?
Because too often lately with sex crimes cases, it depends on the political agenda at the moment to determine whether the victim is believable or not.
Yes, yeah.
Instead of just let the investigation be conducted, let's look at this thoroughly.
Well, Joe Biden's being raked over the coals right now because of his treatment of Anita Hill. When he was the person,
he was interviewing
the politician in charge of that charade, whatever freaking group they had, that he was the one in charge. But he's basically the one that could have put a halt onto what they did to that poor lady.
But they're trying to also apply standards from 30 years ago on today's standards, and you can't do that. And they've destroyed people from look. The Supreme Court justice, they're talking about what he did when he was 16 years old. I mean, that was disgusting.
That's ridiculous.
Well, it's political. I mean, it all comes down to political.
But
and you're fighting.
There's an old Italian expression. What goes around comes around, right? And one day you're going to be the questioner, next day you're going to be the perp.
All these guys, they're all sitting at a table, man. They're playing a high stakes game of poker.
Yeah.
And when you decide to sit at that table, you're basically giving up everybody. My family, my friends, you're all in. Fuck them. I don't give a shit. This is about me and power. Yeah. Ask Avenatti about that lawyer. He wanted to sit down at that table. He folded in one hand. He took everything he got. They threw him out of his office where he worked. Do you know he had a plane? Now, obviously, the guy doesn't own the freaking plane, but this is the way the government works, right? Plane is worth like $4.1 million. And when you get involved in buying one of these planes, you usually go in and buy with a group of people that also have money. So let's say 10 of us get in, we buy this plane. Right. We put down a certain amount, and then there's a calendar that goes around. When you need it, you sign your name up, and I don't know how that works, but either way.
You'd like to.
The guy stopped paying his is in. So they cut him out of the deal. That didn't matter, though, because he at one point, maybe they didn't sign the dot and cross the T's that he's officially out. But they confiscated that plane, the government. Okay, and that plane, obviously, there's all these other people attached to it that are pissed the fuck off because now that thing is part of a case and sitting on a runway somewhere. Maybe the government's using it. I don't know.
Yeah, they might be.
But he lost his fucking plane, man. He lost his plane. He lost his office. He lost his license.
He lost his client.
He's going to jail. He's got like 33 counts against him on 2 different cases. Like one's 16, the other one's 33 counts. Okay, he should have never sat down at that table, man.
No, absolutely.
No, absolutely.
Oh, man, he got raped. Raped. Talk about sex crimes, man. You should open up a case on that dude,
really
man.
Interesting question, a question that a lot of people ask relative to special victims. Does special victims have a high level or a low level or medium level of false reports?
I know John, we're talking about John Savino and he put in his book that it's pretty high. It's certainly not at the 1 or 2%. I don't know.
Attach it not to, lock you into this percentage, but is it a high level of false reports, or is it medium, or is it low? What would you say?
It's higher than what is being presented as what is acceptable. And they're always talking about, there's a lot of unreporting, and there is unreporting.
Sure,
there's no question. But of the cases that are actually reported, there's a significant percentage that are false reports.
And why is that?
It depends on the case. I've looked through cases, or I've done interviews where, one of the biggest days for false reports is New Year's Day, right?
The morning after.
The morning after. There's no way I would have agreed to have sex with this guy if I hadn't been drugged or drunk to the point where I was unconscious, or I should have been home with my husband or so-and-so. Or, according to my parole, I have to be home at 9 o'clock every night, and I wasn't. It just goes on and on and on. I had a brutal case, in a sense, and we have that this woman, she was drinking, she was hanging out with her girlfriends up in Washington Heights. And a couple of them went in to get something to eat, and it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I believe all the girls that were in the car were from New Jersey. And they come back out, and one of the girls is gone. So they're panicking. They're trying to call and everything. What she did is she was drunk. She got out. She got in a van. Some guys were hitting on her. And there was a group of guys in the van. And they take her off. And now her girlfriends are all panicking, trying to find her. And what happens is one of the guys is doing a full court press on her. And he wants to have something sexual from her. And she wasn't giving. She wasn't giving it up at all. And one of the other guys that was in the front seat, as I recall, was saying, take it easy, leave her. And he says, she's not, throw her out here right on the highway. And the other guy's like, no, we're not going to do that. And they drop her off. She gets back. Now, this is a couple of hours. It's, practically morning. The other girls, there's a big brouhaha between the girls. And 2 of the girls, her and another girl in the car, end up getting in a little brawl. Like, duking it out. Mm-hmm. And the girl who was in the van gets battered. Matter of fact, I think they even broke the windshield. And one of the girls during this says, well, where were you? What happened? Did you get raped? Yes, I got raped. Mm-hmm. Right? Now there's an investigation from my old office. And they're investigating this. And what do they have? They bring her there. All right, we don't have DNA. She's all beat up. And the others fail to mention that she's beat up because they had a brawl in the car. Yeah. And they end up doing a thorough enough investigation that they identified 2 guys in the car. And the one guy in the car goes to trial. He's like, I didn't have sex with her. And it was the guy who was really giving her full court press. Yeah. They got one of the other 4 guys in the car, but she doesn't identify him because he was nice to her. Mm-hmm. He goes to trial. He gets convicted. He goes upstate. So these things, this is an exception. Yeah. Because this is why you have sex crimes detectives and sex crimes DAs that are focused on this kind of stuff.
Because not only did they
didn't make a mistake.
He was innocent, too.
Because most of the time you pick it up. But in this case, it wasn't picked up. Yeah. And he went upstate. And after a couple of years, and you know how sex crimes,
how you're treated in prison.
Are treated in prison.
Yeah.
And she ended up having, second heart. Now, sometimes people come back that were genuinely victims, and they recant because they just don't want the guy in prison or whatever it is. But it genuinely happened to them. In this case, she recants to somebody, to the clergy, that it comes around to us. And I end up doing a thorough investigation. I end up identifying all the guys that were in the car, which all were pretty much, as I recall, incarcerated. A number of them in Pennsylvania,
Wow.
in a federal facility.
For other stuff, right?
For other stuff.
And just imagine the amount of work that is.
But not
too,
sex crimes.
right?
Huge,
The work
huge
that
investigation.
is, yeah.
And he ends up getting released, and she ends up getting, she takes a plea. I arrested her.
Because of you.
Yes, I arrested her. And
Filing a false report.
Filing a false
And
report.
Did she go to jail? or-
Perjury,
Perjury.
right? Because she testified at the trial, and she ended up going to jail.
Wow. Well, thank God for
But that's
detectives like you.
luckily an exception.
Yeah.
That was beautiful work, and let's pray that there's many, many more detectives out there working right now, especially in special victims, that learned from you, and that are you left behind a legacy of great, great detective work.
Well, I was with a great group of detectives. It was a great team.
You had some stars.
Everybody always
With
says
them.
that.
Yeah, we did.
The good guy
We
always,
did have a number of stars.
The good guys always say that. They always reference their team, man, and that's how the sign of a good guy.
Yeah.
I wouldn't give credit to anybody. I would just be like, no, that was me. I solved that by myself. And this book, that I worked by myself. As a matter of fact, I was out. I didn't even work in the precinct. They let me work from home. That's how great I was.
No.
But there's so much more to talk about. We didn't get to a chance to cover your time in the DA squad, even though we did a little bit. But we didn't get a chance to focus on it the way we wanted to. But that's what happens when you're having fun, right,
It
Bill?
was time in
Right.
Afghanistan. We didn't even get. a
Oh,
chance to
yeah, you
mention
wanted to
that.
talk about that's another
Well, he
hour.
Obviously, has to come back.
Would you mind coming back?
I wouldn't mind coming back.
Yeah, we'd love having you, man. Thanks a lot for coming by.
Thank you.
You were
Thanks
fantastic.
for having me.
When I was teaching in college, I brought Eddie in as a lecturer. He was great.
Yeah,
These
you did
cases
it.
are just
They're fascinating.
fantastic,
There's
yeah.
so many of them. Like I mentioned earlier, there's just so many cases that you're cutting yourself off, and you're starting on another case that's even more fascinating. And then guess what? There's one on top of that one that's more fascinating.
And some of the people that are listening, that are, TV addicts watching SVU and Law and Order. This is so much different because it's a real gritty, real down to this is how.
I think we
detective
just
work really
basically
happens.
scratched the surface to
Yeah.
you today. Like I said, we'd love to have you back. Is there anything you want
Thank
to
you.
say in parting?
No, I appreciate being on. I know there's some really great people that are dedicated to this work, and hoping
Hawking
that
anything?
continues
You got
forward.
anything to sell? You got a book, a shirt?
No books, no shirts, nothing to sell.
You got to get some SVU shirts.
Yeah.
Really, I'll wear one next time.
The only thing I could say is you're part of a great fraternity of detectives that have been on this show already. Unbelievable superstars.
Yeah. I'm excited.
Sergeants, Tommy Kennedy,
Yeah.
Michael.
We've had a good
O'Keefe,
run so far. We've been
Ralph
blessed, and it just
Freeman,
keeps.
it's
consistent.
Great
Detective
guys.
Pat, oh my God, how can I leave Detective Pat out?
But we'd love to have you back, man. We definitely love to
Thank
have
you.
you back. Thanks for
Of
coming
course,
in.
Joe Belcastro. I could
Yeah.
throw him in there. Before
Yeah,
he
that was
says.
great,
You didn't
too.
mention my name either. Joe Belcastro, great.
Bill, anything in parting? You want to?
Nah, something. This show is really, for me, it brings back sort of great memories of some of the great cases I worked out, some of the great detectives I've worked with, and I just think it's important not only that we bring humor to it, but some of the people out in police land and that are listening to this really get to see and feel the real police work, whether it's investigation or anti-crime work or whatever it is.
Yep.
We've had some of the superstars from the NYPD on this show, and I'm proud to be part of it.
Yeah, me too. I was proud. I worked for 20 years, man. I worked with some of the best cops in the world, man. And it was awesome being able to watch them work, especially because, I was right there with them, watching them work. I mean, I didn't really get involved too much, but I loved watching them work. And now I get to hear your stories too, man. You guys are a fascinating bunch, man. I can't get away from you. All right, on behalf of Police Off the Cuff, Bill Cannon, once again, we want to say thank you to Edward Tacchi for coming in, and we look forward to having you back. Peace.
Thank you.
What's been